Hey guys, I'm troubleshooting the shortwave band on my Philco 60. The first thing I did was check the voltages around the 6A7 oscillator detector tube, and they all seemed reasonable. I then popped in a new 6A7 tube, and I still had the same problem. Then I started checking the components that make up this circuit here, and the only one I thought that might be bad is this old fixed mic capacitor. I put a new one in. Well, that didn't help any. So now I've got my scope out and I've hooked it up to the local oscillator here on the first grid, and I've got a nice clean sine wave on the AM band. So for example, the way this works, if I tune into AM 560, I hear it when the local oscillator is around 1.20 megahertz. This radio has an IF frequency of 460 kilohertz, so AM 560 plus IF of 460 gives you about 1020. And as I rotate the tuning dial, you see that local oscillator frequency increases. However, when I switch to the shortwave band, no oscillations, except at one end, the very end of the tuning, but the frequency is way higher than it should be. It's around 12.5 megahertz. This shortwave band goes from around 1.5 to 4 megahertz. So if you have the 460 kilohertz IF to that, it should be around 2 to 4.5 megahertz, nowhere near 12.5. So for some reason, when I switch over to the shortwave band, it's trying to oscillate at much higher frequencies than it's supposed to. So primary culprit I can think of, since that's a new capacitor, I just put a new capacitor in here. That's a trimmer cap, this guy right here, which I've already adjusted, and it seems to be alright. That's the one I tweaked to get the dial pointer matching up to the local AM stations. So the main culprit left would be this coil. So I already worked on this coil. Maybe there's something not quite right with this, although the resistance readings did seem okay. So what happens when you're in shortwave mode is the switch closes, which shorts out a big chunk of this coil, making it a smaller inductance so it oscillates at a higher frequency. So I guess I'll pop the IF cover off that and at least visually inspect it and see if I can see anything wrong with it. Maybe there's a shorted turn somewhere. I posted some pictures and a description of my problem with this radio online, and a friend gave me a great suggestion, which was to switch the leads on this particular coil here. It's 3.4 ohm winding on the coil. That's very similar to the shortwave winding that I had to rewind, in that it's just a few turns of wire outside the main coil. And on mine, it looked like it had been wrapped with some masking tape. And the resistance checked okay, so I didn't want to mess with it. But it could very well be that somebody had rewound that coil. Well, they may have wound it the wrong way around the coil. So the suggestion I got was to reverse these two leads, and indeed that has fixed my problem. So I'm on the shortwave band right now, and the oscillator now goes from about 4.2 megahertz down to about 2 megahertz, just like it's supposed to. And better yet, I actually get stuff now on the shortwave band.
Donald Rumsfeld, Bush Secretary.
It's about 8 o'clock in the evening now, so I'm picking up a lot of stuff. Shortwave propagates better in the evening. I'm getting a lot of noise, but I got a lot of equipment turned on right now, like my scope, like my camera, like my computer, so that might be where some of this noise is coming from. You know, strong station.
Mira, el diseño para mí surgió desde hace años, simplemente.
Since I've already spent so much time going through this radio and rebuilding and testing everything, I figured I better do this coil too. So I carefully removed it, made a diagram so I know how to hook it back. And then I went online to the Antique Radio forum, and somebody kindly posted a diagram of how this coil should be wound. And what do you know? This one is going the wrong way. It's wrapped around, well, the opposite of what they show in this diagram. So I'm going to carefully unwrap it and then put 17 turns of new wire around the outside, just like I did on the antenna coil. That wasn't too bad. I used exactly the same techniques that I used on the antenna coil, which basically was to remove the remains of the old winding, and then I installed a new plastic strip around to isolate the two windings, and then I wrapped 17 turns of wire around, carefully stripped and tinned the ends, and soldered them onto these two lugs, and I held it all in place with some shellac. I reinstalled the coil, and it is working just fine, I'm happy to say. So I'm on the shortwave band right now. Picking up a bunch of stations. One thing I can't find, though, is I believe there's a time beacon broadcast around 2.5 megahertz. I think it's out of Colorado. I think it's a 2.5, 5, 10, maybe 15 megahertz, something like that. You hear some beeps and tones and various time-encoded info. It's run by the National Institute of Standards, I believe. Might not be the right time of day, or maybe I'm just too far away, or this radio's not sensitive enough to pick it up. But there's certainly other stuff to listen to. So I think all that's left to do on this radio is a little bit of an alignment, which is pretty easy to do. Let's see. I'll pick up down. There it is. So here's the various trimmers in the back. This one I've already tweaked. That is a fine-tuning for the local oscillator. What I did was I put on the AM band and just tuned into various stations that are at known frequencies, and then I just had to slightly tweak that to get this to be dead on. Of course, you can also just leave that the way it is and loosen this up and just rotate the dial around. What I did was I put this dial back on exactly where it had been before. I could see the marks on the brass from the set screw there. And now the others, I got to double check, but I believe you just peak all of these for 460 kilohertz. They don't really give you any detailed info in here on what to do, but I think I came across an article online, or a thread online at the Antique Radio forum, that explained a little bit more how to do an alignment, so I'm going to go double check that right now. Well, I found some instructions at the Antique Radio forum, but they were more specifically for the earlier model, but I think I can apply it well enough to this. Plus there is some brief info here. The one thing they don't tell you in either case is where exactly to inject the RF signal generator. This has a frequency of 460 kilohertz, So I've got my RF generator set on 460, and I wasn't quite sure where to put the input online. It's at the grid of the 6A7. Well, 6A7 has like 4 grids on it, so what I did was I hooked up a 1000 picofarad cap and then just applied the signal to every pin on the 6A7 until I got a decent signal going through the set. I've got my scope hooked up right here on the secondary of the second IF transformer. And now what I'm going to go through is adjust the trimmer caps for the IF. First, the primary on first IF, secondary first IF, primary second IF, and secondary the second IF. Those are these caps along here. This is primary of the first, secondary first, primary second, secondary second. To adjust them, simply use a nut driver. They're 1/4 inch nuts inside there on those trimmer caps. Just be really careful when you're doing this not to short this against the cabinet, because some of these trimmer caps have a pretty high potential on them, as I found out the hard way. For example, here this is at a pretty high potential of a few hundred volts, and that's going right to, for example, this side of the trimmer cap. So when you're doing this, if you bump the side of that, it's kind of like that old game Operation. You will short out the high voltage there and get a nice spark. So that burn mark there in my hex driver, well, that's where it came from. So anyways, what I'm going to do is carefully insert this. There we go. And then tweak it so I get the highest potential, which is around there. Sorry, my scope's trigger is freaking out, but I can see the amplitude changing. So it's really low there. And we want to get that to be alright about there. And then we'll go through and do the other 3 same way. You could probably also do this by ear. This isn't a very complicated radio. Yeah, it's just 2 IF transformers and a trimmer cap on either side of each, so you just peak them all for the intermediate frequency. Alright, up there. So, they really weren't all that off to begin with. Just what I kind of figured. Now the last one there, that is what they call a low frequency compensator for the local oscillator. So what I did is I just, as I said before, I just tuned into like AM 560 and then just tweaked that so that it sounded pretty good. And finally, there are a couple compensators on this guy. One for the local oscillator and one for the antenna. What I'm going to do is simply tweak them a little bit while listening to a station and adjust them so that it sounds the best. There's no instructions I can find anywhere on how to actually adjust those. I've got the radio on the AM band tuned to AM 560, and I'm going to trim these last 2 compensators up here. So I'm just going to do this one by ear. Feels pretty good right about there. That's it right there. And same with the other one.
Right here on AM 560 WIND. In 1977, an 8-year-old boy picked up the game of golf from his father.
Not worried about that.
The odds of that same boy winning the US Open twice. 1-1. With Rich Kogan.
Checking a few other stations now to make sure the dials lined up right. This is AM 720. There's AM 1000. Still pretty much dead on. I'm not sure about any stations down at this end of the dial. I suppose I could use my RF generator to double check that. Let's see, I put on the AM band, or this band here, and let's see, oh, good about 1400. And I'm just gonna twist it around the antenna cable there. And let's see. I'll put the internal modulation on. Oh, there it is. So yeah, that's pretty darn close. Get that 1400 there. Alright, so that is that. So, what's left? I got one still modernish looking resistor underneath. Remember when I was rebuilding the dog bones, I wasn't quite sure what the value or wattage should be for that resistor. Well, it seems to be fine at about 40K, and just judging by the heat, I'd say about 2 watts would be fine, maybe 3 watts just to be safe. So I'll cast another dog bone for that guy. And then that leaves the speaker. The guy who's reconing it for me was a bit of a snafu with getting the right cone for it. The place he ordered it from, I guess they're back ordered, and we're not quite sure when they're going to come in. But in the meantime, I've been using this speaker from my Philco 3760, so I guess I could mount it back in the cabinet with that. I don't think these wires are going to be long enough, so I'll have to dig up some wire for that. To do that, I'll bring the cabinet back inside, and I'll mount the chassis in and so on. I made an attempt to flatten this old dial scale out. Didn't really work though. It kind of rubs at certain spots because it's just deflected so badly. There's a metal pointer back there. Kind of scrapes a little bit there. I guess I could try a little more aggressively to flatten this out. I think I can order reproductions, but I don't really want to bother. That'd be like $20 or so plus shipping, and it's not that bad. Yeah, I guess that's about it. Yeah, one last thing. I guess I am going to go with this potentiometer volume control power switch here, so I am going to have to cut the shaft down and flatten out one side a little bit so the hex knob will fit onto it.
PHU, Canada, Coordinated Universal Test, 9 hours, 44 minutes, camera setting.
I was just scanning around the shortwave band, and I never could find the American time broadcast station, but I did find one out of Canada at around 3.3 megahertz.